Welcome to strategic planning. I'm going to help you think through some ways to approach planning for your nonprofit. I'm assuming most of you maybe haven't done this at all before, maybe just done it a little bit or haven't done it in a while. So that's the level at which I'm going to try and go through this, and we'll kind of go through in pieces together. My name is Liz Coit. I am currently the Executive Director at the Walker Center for Applied Ethics at Meridian University. And so just welcome. Here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to just give you a quick snapshot of my background just so you'll have a little context on where I'm coming from, sort of where I drew some of the information we're going to talk about today. And you will see at the very end, I actually give you my email address. So if you have questions, that may be tied to what I've done before, my background that might actually help you, feel free to reach out. But I'm going to do that first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about sort of why strategic planning? Why not something else? We'll just touch on a couple of things there that might be just sort of spinning around in your head as you're thinking about where does strategic planning fit in my world. Then I'm going to take that strategic plan and we're going to deconstruct it. We're going to look at the various piece parts on how to put it together. What are the critical points and in what order you should do them. And then what now? Like, what should you do next? So that's what we're going to do in the next little while here. So stick with me. I found this, I thought it was very funny because a lot of people think strategic planning is a sort of roll your eye exercise. That could be me, let's say in like 30 years, not today. Just sort of giving a presentation, a strategic assessment, and you can see the doctors are saying, fantastic, save us a fortune in anesthetics. So hopefully this won't put you to sleep, but I'll do my best, I promise. All right, who am I? I do have my MBA. I went to Harvard. I am a certified fundraising professional. A bunch of other acronyms go after that. I am currently, as I said, at Meridian University. I'm the founding director of the Walker Center for Applied Ethics. So I'm doing some really interesting work in the world of ethics tying into business right now. Lots of nonprofit board work. Currently serving as a president of, this happens to be a national dog club, doesn't matter, but lots of nonprofit profit work, both at the board level and then in my background, if you sort of look on the right, I've also been sort of all over the country. So, which brings lots of perspective because lots of differences across the world, but started in college in California, went to New York, came back to Los Angeles in banking, then went into management consulting, which took me actually to Europe and back, then went to Citigroup, which was based out of Hartford, Connecticut, but I actually did work in 99 countries, actually 100 if you include the United States. Then I came here in January 4th of the year 2000 to take over a piece of Conseco as it was going through its transition and coming out the other side of bankruptcy. Then I went into the academic world at Indiana State University, and then I spent 10 years as a director in a nonprofit organization. You may be familiar with Morning Dove Therapeutic Riding up in Zionsville. Took that through quite a few sort of interesting ups and downs, and lots of ups, but lots of experience there. And as I said, now I'm at Meridian University back in the academic side. So lots of different perspectives. And that's the only point of this slide. All right, so let's talk about, sort of this or that. What comes first? Where does the strategic plan fit in all of this? Well, let me just start with sort of someone who I have a lot of respect for. He is since passed away, but still a very influential executive in the world. Jack Welch, former chairman and CEO of General Electric, says, you've got to eat while you dream. You've got to deliver on short-range commitments while you develop a long-range strategy and vision and implement it. The success of doing both, walking and chewing gum, if you will, getting it done in the short range and delivering a long-range plan and executing on that. That's the challenge, right? That's the challenge we all face every day. How do we know we've got a lot to do every day in our lives? How do we fit in taking some time to really think long term? Here's my sort of very non-sophisticated version of that, which is start with the popcorn stand while you design and build the popcorn factory, right? Is there a way that I can get started while I think about the bigger plan, especially in the nonprofit world? And near and dear to my heart, as you just saw in the previous slide, I spend a lot of time as a board member, but also advising nonprofits in their strategic planning process, but also in their startups, which is, we got to keep true to our heart, right? What's our passion? Our passion is actually fulfilling our mission and serving our customer, if you will. So we've got to do that to keep ourselves in the game, but also to start to test it, right? The popcorn stand tests whether I'm in the right place, whether I'm serving the right customers, whether I have even a good quality popcorn, right? Before I put the huge stake in the ground and build the whole factory, right? So, so yes, we're going to juggle both the short term and the long term at the same time. All right, so there's this whole confusion about business plan, strategic plan. What's the difference? Which one do I do first? Are they even really different? Well, they are different. They're very different. So let me start with the business plan. And I know there's an entire course on how to write a business plan, so I'm not going to go into it, but I want to make sure you understand the difference between a business plan and a strategic plan. So first, business plan. It is a written document. It is formal. It should not be on the back of an envelope in its final iteration. It can start there. It can start with little sticky notes all over your computer if that works for you. But ultimately, you want a formal written document. It lays out the goals of your business, right? What are we hoping to achieve? Where are we going? It gives a high level of sort of how you're going to get from here to there, right? What's our sort of, what's our mousetrap as we go forward? It'll talk about your time frame, sort of how long will it take? When am I going to start? I'm going to come back and give you a quick example of this in a minute. And what resources do I need, right? So how much money do I need? What kind of people do I need on my board and my staff? Do I need some sort of special tools or special inputs, right? And very importantly, this is where you get into just that high level view of your costs, your revenues, and your profits. Okay, so that's a business plan. So I'll give you a quick example. I'm on the board of ILAD, in Independent Living for Adults with Developmental Disabilities, which is a new organization. So we've just come through sort of business planning, and we're in the middle of working on strategic planning about a year into this new venture. So goals for the business is to create a sort of micro community right here in greater Indianapolis, serving adults with developmental disabilities. That's our goal. And in addition to that, on top of that, is to create a robust sort of educational and sort of inspirational programming that goes along with that to serve that community. That's our goal. The method of attaining it is going to be to build that community and bring in the resources that we need, right? Our goal is to put a stake in the ground in 2022, or a shovel in the ground in 2022, and obviously the resources there. So, but importantly, what's in there is not only a picture, literally actually pictures of our vision, because we do actually have the architectural drawing, but it talks about our financial needs. It talks about the kinds of people that we need to bring to bear. And so that it's really quite specific, focused on the startup of that nonprofit. All right, so now let's look at the strategic plan, which is what we're here to talk about today. It is also a written document. Write it down because you're going to reference it. You're going to dog-ear that document, maybe electronically these days. We don't really do it in print anymore, although I do. But one way or another, you're going to reference this a lot. So make sure it's formal and make sure it's shareable across your organization. It talks about your priorities for action. So in what order are we going to go after these goals, right? I'm going to, at ILAD, we're going to really focus on programming first and getting the programming up while we're putting the pieces together to get towards building that community. It defines the tactics for achieving those strategies, sort of what exactly is involved, what are our goals, what are our strategies, what is our action plan for achieving those. And then it talks about our metrics for success. How will we know that we've succeeded? What measurements are we going to use so that we can keep ourselves on track, right? We give ourselves feedback. So that's the difference. Let me take another shot at sort of trying to get at the difference here. All right, so audience. Your business plan is really focused on those that you need buy-in from to get started, right? Your funders, donors, investors, depending on your structure, people that might be your partners, your collaborators, whatever that might be. This is your audience for your business plan, right? The audience for a strategic plan is primarily your board of directors and your senior management, right? It is their roadmap for how they're going to move forward towards achieving your mission, your strategies, right? Your staff obviously will also use it as it's rolled out. Time frame. Business plan is the first document you put together when you start your nonprofit. It is done as part of the startup phase. And it's very focused on the short to midterm, right? If your business plan is still not implemented 10 years later, then you've done something wrong in your strategy along the way, right? It is just what's going to get me from here to startup, operational, and running. So fairly short, maybe midterm, right? 0 to maybe 2 or 3 years in. Your strategic plan is the long view. It's looking, I mean, I've been in organizations where 5 years seems forever, so they do 5-year strategic planning. At Meridian University, we do 10-year planning with a 5-year review. And we're actually right in the middle of a 5-year review of our plan. But it was written as a 10-year plan with the intention of then looking midway through to make sure we're on track. But the point being that it's longer range. You're looking further out. So that you can really put together all the pieces and stay on a path, a single path, as opposed to every year with sort of reassessing what my priorities are. And then the goal, and I've mentioned this, but let me just sort of bring it around again. Goal of the business plan is startup phase. It's to obtain funding, obtain other resources. Maybe it's to convince people to come onto your board, which, in the case of iLab, that's how they got me, right? They came to me with their business plan and I bought in and I joined their board. And I wasn't the only one, obviously, but that's the way that worked, right? And then the strategic plan is going concern. So once you're up and running, once you got the nuts and bolts in place, you've got the funding, you're actually on a path, that's when the strategic plan comes in. Sort of hard to write a strategic plan before you've actually got, sort of the train on the tracks. But once the train's on the tracks, you don't want to go too long before you put a plan in place for where that train's going, right? Okay, so that's the difference between a business plan and a strategic plan. All right, so now we're shifting gears. We're going to talk about the strategic plan. If you build it right, it'll work. Promise, it does. It works if you build it right. So what are the pieces of it? Here we go. We're going to start with a vision. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but you need to start with that big picture view of where you're going, right? Then your mission. Your mission talks at a fairly high level, but talks about how you're going to achieve your mission, right? The vision's the big dream. The mission is how we're going to get it done. Then we get to our goals and strategies. Goals and strategies without a mission and vision are just floating in the world, right? They don't anchor you. They don't connect to anything that takes you back to your original intention with your organization, with your nonprofit, right? From your goals and strategies, you can then define your rules of engagement. Fancy term for saying how you're going to do business. What is it I'm going to do every day? So let me look at Morning Dove Therapeutic Riding. We are an equine therapy program, right? So our goals and strategies were to, their mission is to improve the lives of people, children and adults with disabilities. How are we going to do that? Our rules of engagement is we are going to do that through equine therapy. We are going to partner the horse, the equine, with the rider through a therapeutic, a certified therapeutic riding instructor. Those are our rules of engagement. That's how we were going to achieve our goal. Then once you sort of know that, right, what we're doing is we're matching horse to person with disability using a therapeutic instructor. Now, what do we do every day? Sort of what kind of horses do we need? How often are we going to schedule therapies? How are we going to schedule therapies? Exactly who is our customer? What geography are we serving? Et cetera, right? So you can't get to the detail until you sort of go through the rest of this. Once you have those pieces, you then begin to generate outcomes, right? I then begin to serve my customer, right? And once you start to do that, the very critical component, and if you've ever been funded by a grantor, increasingly as time has gone on, they want to know, what are your outcomes? What's the impact that you have, right? And so all of these pieces lead you to outcomes that actually reflect your mission and your vision, right? The important piece about this is you need to know how you're going to measure that so that you know whether you did it or not, right? Did it succeed? Did I actually achieve the outcomes that my system intended? If not, I'm going to go back and revisit my tactics, right? I'm actually not improving lives of children with disabilities in the way I'm going about, partnering the horse with the rider. I'm going to reevaluate my tactics for achieving that, right? But what I'm not doing is I'm not circling all the way back and revisiting my vision. or my mission, right? On an annual, quarterly basis, I'm just sort of circling in this space on the right of this screen, re-looking at how I'm going about doing it, how I'm going about implementing my goals and strategies under the umbrella of my mission to make sure that I'm getting the outcomes that I intend, right? That I'm actually achieving my mission. So that's the system. And if you have all those pieces, I promise it will work. All right, so let's break it down. This is sort of a table of contents, if you will, for what your strategic plan could look like, right? You're going to start with your background and history. We'll talk about that in a minute. Vision, mission is something that we call SWOT, which you may be familiar with. If you're not, we'll come right back to that. And then, creating your goal strategies, developing your tactics, which is the really specific action plan, timeline, very critical. When are you going to get it done? Your metrics, how you're going to measure whether you succeeded or not. And then what most of us forget to do in our strategic plan is that risk assessment, right? What are the risks that I might face? And how am I going to plan for them to mitigate those risks from derailing me on my path? Okay, so those are the piece parts. Let's break it down. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at sort of the section, the chapter of your strategic plan called background and history. Okay. At the end of the day, this section should convince your reader that this is an important need, right? Whatever need I'm trying to solve, improving lives of children with disabilities, for example, and that you, me personally, my organization, I need to be involved, right? Children with disabilities absolutely need their lives improved, but do I bring anything to the table that makes their life better, right? So the point of this section is to really set that up. So you're going to write your story, right? You have a story. I know in the nonprofit world, you have a story that got you where you are, whether it involves your own personal experience, whether it's your community, whether it's just a passion that you have a story that brought you to this place. You need to define the need, be very specific, right? So I'll just take one piece of the segment. I'm using Morning Dove because I spent 10 years there and it's very close to my heart. Children with autism rarely have the kinds of support that they need in the community or in their schools to really address and help them develop independence given their diagnosis, right? So there is a need to create alternative approaches, alternative therapies to feed into the overall plan in support of children with autism, okay? How big is it? How many kids with autism are there? How many are there in my geography? How many of them have hours in their day, right? I mean, you got to take that into consideration, right? If I define that children with autism really do need alternative therapies, however, their school day starts at 8:30 in the morning and doesn't end until 5:30 at night, do I really have a lot of time left when I could do this, right? And how does that change the way I think about it? So you really need to understand is there a real need? What is it? How big is it? And is it real? Is it something I can actually do something about? And if I solve it, does it really matter, right? So, and of course it does in the example that I'm using, but ask yourself that question about your own business, right? Which if instead you just have a passion that there should be more yellow flowers and gardens in your neighborhood, right? Well, the need is, I just observed there aren't any yellow flowers and gardens in my neighborhood, and there are 35 houses in my neighborhood who on average have a 1/4 acre yard. So I multiply that out and I've got this huge need for me to supply yellow flowers. But if I solve it, does it matter? Will anybody care, right? Maybe they do. Maybe you have a neighborhood full of people who only see the color yellow, and without the color yellow, they're not experiencing color in their garden. But that's an extreme example, obviously, and not real. However, those are the kinds of questions you need to ask, right? Make sure that it really will matter. And I'm not just saying that because you're going to waste your time. I'm saying that because you have to convince someone else to invest either their time, skill, or treasure in your business at some point. So make sure, and I'm sure that they do. I don't think I've ever had someone pitch a new idea to me where it didn't matter, but they hadn't articulated it well on a piece of paper. So mostly I put these questions here as a way to test whether the story you're writing conveys that message, right? That it is a real need, it is big, and solving it actually matters, okay? What's the environment for my idea? What's my role? Do I have any background in this, right? Have I ever done anything ever that you could convince you that I'd be able to pull this off, right? Just pick whatever your nonprofit mission is. And if you don't, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means you want to think about, who am I going to bring onto my team, right? Who else is trying to address it? Your competitor analysis. And I said it in that order on purpose. Because we rarely like to think of, in the nonprofit world, of having competitors. But we may have other people trying to solve the need, and it might not just be equine therapy, right? It might not be how I'm doing it, and that's not even as important, but it may be someone else going after the same mission, right? Improving the lives of children with disabilities, adults and children with disabilities. There may be 5 or 6 other organizations looking in my geography, right, in my local community that I'm proposing to serve, trying to do the same thing. And what does that mean? It might mean nothing. It may just be great. Now we have lots more to offer in a menu of services to this community, but it also might mean I'm competing, right? And that it will be very hard for me to be successful because there's just too many competing options for my target audience here. So you need to put that on a piece of paper, look at it, and really explore it. Make sure that you're comfortable that that you're unique enough, or that there's enough need for you to actually succeed. Regulations, depends on where you are. If you're in anything that has to do with healthcare, there are other areas as well, but certainly healthcare comes to mind, providing provision of services related to well-being. There may be regulations. You need to know what they are. You need to put them on a piece of paper. You need to make sure your board knows what they are, so you're never on the wrong side of those regulations. Okay, and then access to resources. Can I actually, I'll go back to equine therapy. Can I actually find the horses appropriate for equine therapy? I mean, if I live in an area where there are no horses, maybe I'm in downtown New York City, might not actually be a very feasible proposal, right? So you'll want to address that right up front. So that's sort of your, setting the stage for your strategic plan. Put that story together, put all that detail in there, and then go read it, have somebody else read it, and see if they're convinced that it's an important need, and that you and your proposal need to actually get involved and be engaged in solving it, okay? That's the background and history piece. Last piece, sorry, wind up. Where are we today? That just sort of is a wrap up. Let's look at where we are in the spectrum of solving the need, right? Where are we, meaning my organization, sort of how far in am I? Am I through the startup phase? Am I still looking for a new building? Or, in the case of equine therapy, am I still trying to find horses? Sort of where are you? What's left to do to really be up and running before your strategic plan can kick in? So that's that last piece of that to sort of wrap that section. Okay. All right, let's move on to the vision statement. This is your, what would the world look like if I succeed? This is your sort of big dream statement, right? Put it on, how do I articulate it, right? Something is gone, some evil is gone, the weeds are gone from the gardens of every school in America, right? It's the end of hunger in my community. I wiped out disease. I am, free from oppression and injustice. These are your sort of big statements, right? We won, we solved some unsolvable problem. We achieved, some big goal. These are sort of your words. This is your big sort of headline statement. So I'm just gonna sort of suggest at the end of this next slide, if you can, put a pause in this presentation and take some time. And if you don't want to do it now, when you come back, there's a couple of spots throughout where you'll see this silly little bumblebee with his little stop sign, where it's just sort of a good place to pause. And if you can take the time to do it as you're going through this, you'll be less cluttered as you attempt it, right? So anyway, that's sort of what this is about. But let me tee it up for you. So when we go to the vision statement, you're going to think about your nonprofit, the one you hope to start, one that you're actually, maybe you're involved with on staff or on the board, maybe you're a volunteer. Just pick an organization that's most relevant to you and write the breaking news headline. Don't call it a vision statement yet, because it's not what this is. This is what's on the front page of pick your newspaper, right? The Indy Star, whatever it might be. What's that headline? So I have this sort of fake company that I made up. And so here it is. Here's my headline. Team of genius monkeys solves the hunger crisis in Indiana. That would definitely make me read the article, right? Team of genius monkeys makes food out of air, right? Those are sort of headline statements, not a vision, but that's my headline. I think it's easiest to write your vision if you start with the headline. And that's not me promoting the media, promise, but it helps you get to the level I want you to be at when you think about your vision statement, okay? Once you do that, just change a few words and you'll have your vision statement. Now, you might still edit it down the road, but you'll essentially have it, right? So if my headline is Team of Genius Monkeys Solves the Hunger Crisis in Indiana, my vision statement is the vision of Monkey Smart Inc., that's what I'm calling my fake company here, is that no child in Indiana will go hungry. That's my vision. Someday I believe I'm going to be able to help solve hunger among children in Indiana, right? And that's my vision for my company, right? So just try that exercise real quick. Obviously, this may not be hopefully, it won't be your final version of your vision statement, but think about your own organization for a minute here. Write your headline. What would you love to see on the headline of the paper about your nonprofit? And then see if you can write the vision statement. And if you've already got a vision statement, go compare it. See whether they're actually comparable to each other. I think one of the most challenging things, and I actually was meeting with some board members yesterday of a new startup nonprofit, and their mission and vision statements were actually reversed. And so it's really very, very hard. But to me, this is a way to really separate the two. Write your headline, then turn it into your vision statement, and you will most often be dead on accurate with your vision statement. So do this if you can. Compare it to your existing vision statement and see where you are. Okay, that's visioning. All right. From your vision statement, you can write your mission statement, right? I know from my vision statement what I want to do, right? I want to solve hunger for children in Indiana. So your mission statement should really include at least these 4 things, right? It should say what you do, your intended impact, for whom we do it. And you're going to want to be specific. And I'm going to kind of give you some examples of that, right? You're not going to want to just sort of leave it open, right? I'm going to solve hunger, right? You're going to say who specifically you're targeting. And I'm going to talk about why in a minute, why it's important to be specific here. You're going to talk about how you're going to do it, right? What's your basic premise for how you're going to get from here to there? I provide equine therapy, right? I am going to improve lives of children with disabilities through equine therapy. That's how I'm going to do it. How will I know that we've succeeded, right? What's your one big high level measure of impact? And then make sure it's not limiting. I'm going to talk about that in just another slide here, because you don't want your mission statement to limit yourself for lots of reasons. So your mission statement, and I put my mission statement right on the wall right, in my office or my refrigerator, wherever it is, I would most frequently get distracted. It's a reminder of our purpose when we get buried in our programs. And if you've been in the nonprofit world, which I'm sure you have, even if it's as a volunteer, it's very easy to get down in the details, because what we really want to do is help people in our programming, right? So the mission statement is a reminder. And I'm going to give you one quick example here, and then I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about this. One quick example, when I first got into, took on the reins, literally, sorry for that was an intended pun, the reins at Morning Dove Therapeutic Riding, they had rescue horses in the barn. People had approached them to ask if in fact they would take on horses that needed to be rescued. Well, so one thing that you won't know, but I know is that it is rare that a rescue horse makes a good therapy horse. They come with a lot of trauma and a lot of unknowns, which is really your riskiest aspect in therapy, is sort of not knowing what might trigger the horse. And so that to me was a derailment of mission. Not that rescuing horses wasn't important. It was really, really important, but it was an organization that had forgot its mission, right? They had allowed themselves to be distracted really by their hearts, which of course makes it very hard, which is to help save these horses. But what was happening was that a lot of their resources, both in terms of people, but also in terms of money, was being funneled into rescue versus their real mission, which was supporting and improving lives of children with disabilities, right? So the mission reminds you, where are my train tracks, right? Where does my train need to stay? And that doesn't mean you just ignore the problem that comes along, because we're good people and kind people, but it means I don't necessarily bring it into my barn, quite literally in this case, right? So as we think about, we're going to do a little bit quick exercise here in a minute, but as we think about the mission statement, why is it important to be specific? I think the easiest is that last bucket. It's to remind us who we are, right? If I'm not specific with about who I'm serving, right? That I'm serving children with disabilities, it would be easy for me to maybe get pulled off of that mission without forethought. Now you might expand, right? You might expand at some point and say, wow, it turns out that if I can serve children with disabilities, I can actually serve young adults with disabilities. So I may expand my mission, but it is supposed to be definitional and define your boundaries in some way. The other thing that it does is it tells your reader, and we're hoping your reader is a donor many times, as well as someone who might use your services, what you do. If you, as you go out and you start from here forward, every time you read a mission statement, pause yourself and ask if you know what that organization does and who they serve. And you'll be surprised how often you can't tell what they really do, or how they do it, or whether it's even relevant to you. And that's sort of a lost opportunity, right, for you to clarify to your reader before you've ever engaged with them, whether this service is for them, whether this is something that they might want to contribute their own time, talent, or treasure to. So it is important that your mission statement is more specific than vague, right? All right. So here's my little Monkey Smart company. And here I just wrote two different mission statements, both of which you might see out there in the world, both of which could sort of work probably, right? But one is better than the other. So the first one, Monkey Smart, will eliminate hunger among Indiana children living in food deserts through innovative uses of air to make food. Okay, I made this up. Absolutely. I wish I could do this, but I absolutely made this up. The other version of it could be Monkey Smart Inc. will reduce hunger by 20%. So let's just do a sort of a quick evaluation. And if we were in person, I would make you do this for me, but I'm going to do it for you. So who are we serving? Well, let's see. In the first one, we are serving children in Indiana who are living in food deserts. So pretty specific, right? I'm going to go right at the heart of the matter. I can see that. I read that. I know you're serving children who currently are facing food shortage, right? In the second version of this, I don't actually know. I'm going to guess I am going to reduce hunger among hungry people, right? So not real clear. It may be that your goal is that you're going to just solve world hunger, right? Which is sort of, or at least by 20%, which is, sort of what the second version of this implies. But if that's not what you're trying to do, solve world hunger or reduce world hunger by 20%, probably the first one is a better version of your mission statement, right? Is it clarifying or limiting? Is it clarifying how much I'm going to do, right? So the first one says I'm going to eliminate hunger, but I'm going to do it in a pretty specific geography among a pretty specific group of people. But I'm going to eliminate it. It's gone. So that's probably clarifying. Might be a little grandiose. We can come back and talk about that. The second one says I'm going to reduce it by 20%. Well, what happens if you're wildly successful? Which I love to dream that dream, right? It's easy to dream the what happens if I fail, but let's dream the what if I'm wildly successful dream. And I hit 20% in the first few years, my mission statement's out of date. My mission statement is void. So I would actually say putting something like that in here, be really sure that that's a lofty goal. And it may be, I mean, if I could reduce world hunger by 20%, I'm sure that's pretty lofty, especially because I'm only one organization, right? So, but just so test it, make sure that it's not limiting you. It's not something that if you're successful, you'd actually achieve in the next couple of years, that in fact, it's an aspirational goal, if you will, okay? Does it say how I'm going to do it? Well, if you look at the second one, I have no idea. I know nothing about Monkey Smart, never heard of them before, and I have no idea how they're proposing to achieve this, which means a couple things. One, I don't know whether Monkey Smart has credibility to say that they can reduce hunger because I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know whether it's relevant to me, right? What if they're going to reduce hunger, in ways that I don't agree with, right? Which we can come up with all kinds of ethical scenarios on that one, which I won't. So it doesn't tell me anything about how they're going to do it. The first example says that I'm going to do it through innovative uses of air to make food. And that's not super specific, but at least I know it's about innovation and it's about sort of creating alternatives and increasing the volume of food. I have some idea that there's science involved here. Maybe it's a little movie food magic. I don't know. I made this company up, but it does attempt to explain how we're going to achieve our goal, right? And then does it talk about the intended impact, which in our case it does, right? The first one, actually they both do, right? The first one says they're going to eliminate hunger among Indiana children. The second one says they're going to reduce hunger by 20%. So in both cases, I'm pretty clear on what their impact is. So let me go back to sort of real scenario here. If I go back and look at Morning Dove, they're going to improve the lives of adults and children in central Indiana who have disabilities through equine therapies. So it talks specifically about who their audience is, adults and children with disabilities in central Indiana using equine therapy, right? So it sort of does all of that. The intended impact is we're going to improve their lives, right? And I am actually paraphrasing their mission because I don't remember it, but that's sort of where you want to go. So go back and look. If you don't have a mission statement, see if you can write one once you finish your vision statement. If you do have one, go back and sort of test it. Ask yourself, is it clear who I serve? Have I set up goals? Are they clarifying? Are they limiting? Does my mission statement explain how I'm going to do this at some level? And does it set out a goal for how I'm going to impact? How will I know I'm successful, right? Just go back and ask yourself those questions about your mission statement. All right, so here are the two, to me, these are sort of the foundation of your strategic plan. Your vision statement, the vision of Monkey Smart is that no child in Indiana will go hungry, right? Someday I'm going to achieve that, right? Your mission statement, Monkey Smart, will eliminate hunger among Indiana children living in food deserts through innovative uses of air to make food. I would actually, if we were in person, I would pause right here and I would say to you, what's missing from my mission statement? Because actually when we set them next to each other this way, I look at it and I say, doesn't actually tell me in my mission statement how long I'm going to do that, right? So I could make this mission statement one step better by saying Monkey Smart Inc. will eliminate hunger among Indiana children living in food deserts by the end of the decade, right? I just FYI, right? So I could add in sort of a real timeline here, and that would make my mission statement even stronger, right? It works the way it is, but it could be stronger. Okay. All right. So this is another pause point. If you've got time to do this while you're going through this presentation, this would be a great time to take a pause. Take that vision statement that you wrote or the one you revised after the last pause and see if you can write your mission statement or rewrite your mission statement, asking yourself these sort of key questions, right? Who am I serving? How am I doing it? where am I doing it, and what's the impact, right? How will I know I did it? So take that pause right here, and if you can, and see if you can just take your mission statement to the next level. All right, so I know that what you did was pause that and actually work on your mission statement. And I know you now have a vision statement. So now let's write the plan. It's 3 easy steps. Okay, it's 3 easy steps. All right, here's what comes next. We're gonna write some goals, right? What's a goal? The goal is the object of a person's ambition or effort, an aim, a desired result, right? So you've got your mission. What are your goals? Then you write your strategy, which is your plan of action. How am I going to achieve those goals? That's going to be part 2. And then part 3 is the tactics, right? Tactics are the actual action steps. That's your action plan, your project plan, call it what you will. It is a carefully planned set of actions intended to achieve your strategy, ultimately to achieve your goals. So those 3 pieces, and they're separate from each other. Don't skip a piece, right? Or you'll sort of confuse yourself in tactics. That's the easy part, right? The hard part is making sure that the actions that you're taking, in fact, support your strategies and your goals. And so here's my experience. Let me just sort of wrap back. You remember back to that very second slide, I guess, or third slide. I've been in the for-profit world. I've been in the academic world. I've been in the nonprofit world. Now I'm back in academia. Let me just tell you what it's like, if you have never done it, to go from the corporate world where you have experts in everything at your fingertips. I was with, Citibank, Citicorp. If I wanted a new ad strategy or a new marketing plan or a new website, I knew the 4-digit extension of the person who ran the department, right? Well, enroll yourself into the nonprofit world where all of a sudden you don't even have paper clips in your desk, right? So you're really focused on finding those paper clips and the paper that you need, and then figuring out whose copy machine you can go use. It's really easy in the nonprofit world to really get bogged down in the tactics and forget what's mission critical, meaning what fits with your goals and your strategies. So I think, even though I would never skip a strategic plan in the for-profit world, I absolutely think that's critical in the nonprofit world to help you sort through all of the things that are vying for your time and resources. And that means don't start with tactics, start with goals, then go to strategy, and then to tactics. Okay, so before we can do that, we need to know what our starting point is. You need to know yourself, which we call a SWOT. And if you've never done a SWOT, this is what it is. You're going to learn it right now, and forevermore, you'll get the sticky gold star, the badge of honor that you can do a SWOT. So what is a SWOT? SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? So 2 of those are internally focused, your strengths and weaknesses within your own organization, and 2 of those are externally focused, opportunities and threats, opportunities in your community, your environment, and the outside world, and then things that might be threatening coming at you preventing you or tripping you up as you're trying to go through. I'll make a quick note here on the bottom, which is if you have a startup, small nonprofit, you'll have one of these, right? It will be your primary mission will be one thing. As you grow, you may find that you'll want multiple sort of SWOT analyses because your programming really diverges, right? Or you've added programming that's slightly different. So you'll want to evaluate them separately. So for example, if we go back to equine therapy, that program started literally with putting people on horses. And that was our sort of mode. That was our rule of engagement for how we were going to deliver on our mission. But as we evolved and as the needs in our community evolved, we added unmounted programs, right? So these were programs that didn't involve getting on the back of a horse. But in that sense, it had a different target market. It had a different sort of operating model. It required different resources. And in some ways, it competed differently in the marketplace. And so we had sort of 2 separate, if you will, sort of analyses of those programs that we would review periodically to make sure that we stayed in front of it and that we could still be successful. So So that's just a sort of a little caveat. If in fact you are putting a strategic plan on a train that's been on the tracks for a while, meaning that your nonprofit has been operating for a while and you've already got these sort of multi-program sort of model in place, you might want to start here. Just keep in mind, it might be very hard if you're already a more complex organization to just do one of these pieces of analysis and really get something meaningful for all of your programming. Okay, so that was my caveat, but I'm going to go back to pretending we're a startup here. So let's talk about what these are. So when you're thinking about strengths, remember, this is strengths of your organization. This is an internal view. You're going to want to look at the skills on your team, right? Do I have a good leader? Do I have good leadership on my team? Do I have someone who actually knows how to deliver my product, right? So in the case of equine therapy, do I have a good leader? Sure, okay, but do I actually have certified riding instructors, right? Do I have someone who knows how to take care of a horse? In addition to that, do I have a fundraiser? Do I have fundraising skill somewhere on my team? Do I have marketing skill on my team? Do I have administrative skill on my team? Do I have legal help on my team? So you want to really understand what are the strengths of your team? What do you bring to the table? Do I have a reputation, right? That really helps you sort of get up the curve pretty quickly in terms of people finding you and wanting to use your services. Do I have that reputation, or do I need to add that to my team, right? If it's the strength of your team, terrific, right? If you've got people in your organization and your organization is doing environmental cleanup, and if you've got scientists and environmental civil engineers who are already part of your team, you've really taken a leap ahead, right? Otherwise, that's just to make a note to yourself that you want to go do that. And then sort of other things that might be unique to you, right? I've already got the building. I've already got, the rakes that I need to sort of rake the forest. So that's sort of your inventory of what you're good at. The flip side of that is what's missing. If I look internally, what's missing from my team, what are the weaknesses? Do I have a major gap in skills? My experience is that most startup nonprofits, their gap is fundraising. And you'll find very quickly as you start that you will wish that you had good fundraisers, either on your board or in your volunteer corps or on your staff. So, but it could be other things, right? That you're missing, that as you start to get going, you realize are weaknesses in your team. A lack of reputation, right? I just don't have the credibility that I need, or maybe there's a trip. Maybe I've tripped in my past, or someone else on my team has tripped, and that reputation is going to give you a little bit of a slow start, or be something that might be difficult to overcome. So you're going to have to think about how you can overcome that. Lack of funding, that is probably the most common weakness for a nonprofit, and it's something to put on a piece of paper and recognize and keep thinking about, right? All right, so let's go down to the external side of the SWOT analysis, looking at opportunities. Market opportunities. As a startup, you've done your needs analysis, that's in your background. So hopefully up front, you haven't gotten to this point and don't have a market opportunity, but it may be when you go do your SWOT analysis 5 years in or 10 years in, that the opportunity, there's new opportunities. I will tell you, in equine therapy, when the autism diagnosis became formal, everyone thought, oh, now everybody has autism. Well, no. Everyone already had autism. We just now had a name for it. But all of a sudden, as a parent, I now had something tangible that I could work with to help my child, right? So I became, because of that, I now was seeking service. I am seeking services that I wasn't otherwise seeking. So that was, not at all in a crass way, but for us in the therapy world, and I'm not just in equine therapy, in all the therapy world, we really had to dig in, understand that diagnosis, and really create therapies that specifically address the needs of that population. That was a huge market opportunity. It was also a weakness at the time because we didn't have that expertise on our team and we had to go look for it, okay? Maybe it's a new product opportunity. In our case, going from sort of mounted equine therapies to those unmounted, which are tremendously successful in anything that involves teaching interpersonal skills, relationship building, addiction high-risk kids, gangs, that kind of thing. And that was a new product opportunity for us, even though that market had been there forever. We certainly did not trip over the addiction market or the sort of at-risk youth market, but all of a sudden we had developed this new product to serve that market, right? Funding, right? Big grant comes your way. I would not be at Meridian University today if it weren't for a very benevolent donor who decided that his legacy, he wanted his legacy to be a contribution in ethics in the business world. And he had a long career. He was a second generation. He is second generation owner of a business his mother founded decades ago. His mother has since passed. He, now retired in his 80s. His son and soon his grandson are going to take over that business. But he got to a point in his life where he wanted to do something very meaningful. And so he funded the center that I now run at Meridian University. So I know that pot of gold doesn't come at everybody's at the end of everyone's rainbow, but it might. And it might in a small way or a big way. And that would be a huge opportunity to maybe take your organization to the next level, right? Or to somehow amend it, still staying within your vision, because that's a whole different topic about whether you let donations take you off mission or not. And then the other one might be maybe you see an emerging need that's coming down the pike, right? So those are opportunities that you'll want to take a pause and reevaluate your strategic plan. To make sure that if it's appropriate, you bring them in. If it's not appropriate, you keep them out, right? Threats. These are the things keep us up at night, right? So threats to our organization. There's always that threat of not acting, right? The market moved on us. All of a sudden, we've discovered that, everyone really does have a deep allergy to horses, which of course sort of in my world. But we just sort of ignore it and keep going. Here's a huge one that happened to all of us almost to the day, a year ago. What if I were in a therapy situation? I were my service dealt with serving people, and I ignored the COVID risk, right? What would that have done to my organization? And we all know that in many cases, there was nothing easy about that decision. But what if we had ignored it, right? And what if, in fact, something traumatic and tragic had happened because we ignored the risk of COVID a year ago, right? So that real and topical risk we would have to think about in our organization. Same thing, risk of not acting fast enough, meaning the new opportunity came along, but we dragged our feet, we thought about it, we hemmed and hawed, and we sort of missed the window to really improve our business. That's equally a risk. And it is hard in the nonprofit world because you're so busy, you have so few resources to be thinking about sort of new things and what's happening in the marketplace. But somebody needs to, and it may be someone on your board. I mean, that's a great role for your board, is to continually be looking in the community to sort of say, wow, it looks like this whole new school just went in, and we don't typically serve middle school. We've been focused on high school, but here they are, and we ignore it. And all of a sudden someone comes in underneath us and takes that market and then grabs our high school market, right? So, and that, like I said, in the nonprofit world, I said earlier, you don't necessarily want to think of them as competitors, but you also don't want to waste resources, right? So you just don't want to miss the boat and all of a sudden be obsolete because you weren't paying attention, okay? So those are the kinds of threats. All right, so we're gonna just play with this a little bit with my Monkey Smart company. So remembering that the vision of Monkey Smart is that no child in Indiana will go hungry. The mission is that Monkey Smart will eliminate hunger among Indiana children living in food deserts through innovative uses of air to make food. What is our starting point for this really cool little company that we're doing? So here's my SWOT analysis. The strengths of my company, as I'm starting out here, is that I have a genius team of scientists. Never mind, they happen to be monkeys. We'll come to that later. But I have this team. They're already here. I have this really innovative idea, and it's such a good idea that the NIH has already funded it, right? National Institute of Health. So I already have an NIH grant, which if anybody's ever done that, takes years. So, so I feel like we have a proven concept. I've got the I was going to say horsepower, but monkey power to get it done. And so those are really solid, right? However, I look at the weaknesses of my little company. We're monkeys. My scientists are monkeys. And that I might have some credibility issues with that, right? I might have to worry about that in terms of whether people believe that we're actually able to do what we did. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing this exercise if I had a strategic plan, so I don't have one. And obviously have communication challenges. What does that actually mean? Well, my monkeys don't speak English, right? So that's something that's going to be hard, right? Because I can't use my scientists in this case to communicate with the outside world. Okay. Play along with me. I know this is completely fabricated, but it is what it is. So now let's look outside, right? So the whole science of this is that I can take air and I can turn it into food. So air is plentiful. I mean, if I look at the external market, the opportunity is essentially uncapped, right? Because air is everywhere and it's free. So my major resource is free here. And the state of Indiana is buying in. They are willing to put money into this because they want this solved and they really do believe in our concept, right? So in my case, I've got the funding on the other side. On the flip side, what are the threats that I'm facing? Well, there's this company out there called Pollute USA, which is ruining the air that I need, right? And they're growing. So I've got to think about that in my strategic plan, how I'm going to deal with that potential threat to my proposition here. And then the other one is I could put lots and lots of resources into this, right? As you can imagine, this is pretty science-based organization. There'll be a lot of resources tied up, equipment, money, expertise. And if I don't move fast enough and someone else solves it, bravo for them. Obviously, the faster we solve hunger among Indiana children, the better. However, I will have then wasted my resources, right? Or in some pretty important resources. So I need to think about that, whether I can actually get to market fast enough to be useful and to justify tying up the resources I'm going to tie up. So that's just a quick, sort of silly, obviously, example of what a SWOT analysis might look like. But now I know where my starting point is. And if you pause yourself and look at this, you can sort of start to see where some of my action plan and my goals come through, okay? So if you want, here's another chance for you to pause and just play with this little grid for your own organization. Obviously, trust me, you will edit and rewrite this over and over, but it might be kind of a fun exercise on a scribble piece of paper next to you right now to sort of hit pause on this and play with it a little bit with your own organization and see what it looks like. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on now. So once you've got your SWOT, so what? That sounds great, right? What do we need to do with it? So if you look at your strengths, you need to make sure that you secure them, right? That you've got retention, that those scientists, those genius scientists, they're everything to you, right? You've got to make sure that they're in place, they're happy, whether it's a contract, whether, it's more bananas on their breaks, whatever it might be, you need to make sure that that team is secure, that you're financing. If, in this case, the state has said, go for it, but do I have a contract yet, right? Do I have that in writing? Do I know when that money is going to come? Lock it in. And then, be prudent, but move quickly, right? When you look at your weaknesses, you want to fill those gaps the best you can, right? So if what I've got is a team of monkeys who can't speak English, I need to make sure that somewhere in my leadership team is a human who can actually interface with humans, in that sense. If I'm an unknown, right, this is probably a big one for nonprofits, right? I have this great idea. I'm in my own backyard. I have a lot of expertise, but nobody knows me. And you might think that doesn't matter, but it does matter with donors. It matters when people have choices of where they're going to put their money. It matters when I'm basically saying, you need to trust me that the food I'm making out of air is real. My brand will matter. So you want to think about what kind of partnerships could I put in place? What are some other ways that I might be able to build credibility if in fact I think that's one of my weaknesses, okay? If there are opportunities out there, just go get them, right? If Indiana's sitting out there dangling, that the big grant in front of me to get my lab up and get the air turning into food. Don't wait around and think about it. If you've done all your homework, just keep going. And when you're thinking about threats, obviously it depends on what the threat is, but you want to really think about what your strategy is to shore it up. If your threat, for example, and this is just the example that I use, is a lack of resources, or it's going to be a stretch. Maybe a partnership works, maybe a collaboration works, right? Where you might be able to share resources. This company or organization that's kind of in its startup, ILAD, which is the organization that serves adults with developmental disabilities. We're borrowing office space, we're borrowing legal, we're all of that kind of stuff. We're sort of collaborating because to not have access to those resources might really slow us down or even stop us from what we're doing. And so we've thought pretty strategically about how we can mitigate those threats. Okay. All right. So you've got a vision, your mission, you understand your starting point. That was your SWOT. Now what? Now what do you do next? Next, you're going to set goals. You're going to define your strategies, and you're going to detail your tactics. Okay. This one was kind of funny. So when you're setting your goals, be sure you're not aiming too high. And I don't have to read this to you, but I thought it's kind of cute. So there you go. Your goals need to be on point with your mission. So here's, keep using Monkey Smart. Your mission, Monkey Smart, will eliminate hunger among Indiana children living in food deserts through innovative uses of air to make food. Your goals are your desired results. Your strategic priorities are your plans of action, right? So this is just an example. I'm not going to go on ad nauseum about it, but if that's our mission, our first goal is establish a top-notch research team. What do we have to do that? Well, first we need lab space, so they need a place to work. We need to retain that team. We need to obtain them if we don't have them, retain them. And we need to establish research protocols and timelines and so forth, right? So obviously this would be in a lot more detail if I were doing it for real. My second goal is develop and implement a risk management protocol. I'm in the science world here. I'm in health, I'm in food. I better contain my risk. I better understand them. I might need, the IRB involved if I'm doing clinical trials. I might need, review plans and whatnot. So you'll know in your own business how much, where the risks are, but you need to make sure you do that. But you want right up front in your planning to make sure you have a process for controlling your risks. And then, my next goal, create trial protocols, et cetera, right? So goal, plan, desired result, plan of action, put it on paper, right? There's a lot that goes into your business. Right. All right. So we've checked off starting point. We've checked off goals and strategies for achieving them. Now let's get down to our tactical plan. We're ready now, right? Because we didn't do our tactical plan first. We've already established that would have been a bad idea. But now we're ready to sort of answer these questions, right? What actions need to happen, in what order, and by when, right? So this really helps your team, you and your team, including your board, these are sort of their marching orders, right? Your tactical plan will also address what resources you need to implement your plan. And that might be people, it's certainly money. It might be tangible resources, right? I might need air in the case of Monkey Smart. Facilities, maybe I have structural, legal, regulatory, all of these things that might maybe have to be in place before I can start. You're going to need some metrics, right? You're going to need to determine what your measurement of success is. And then you need to do your risk assessment and mitigation plans. Right? Okay. All right, so let's look at what that might look like. So we saw on the other page a couple of slides ago, on the left of this screen, right? We have our goals, we have our strategic priorities, and then you're going to take each one of those strategic priorities So you see how I've done this, and I am not an accountant, but I still do it this way. So I have my goal number 1, which is establish a top-notch research team. And then I take my strategic priority A, right? So it's priority 1A, goal 1, number A, which is to secure lab space. And then I'm going to break that down into detail. This is not in detail because it's just an example, but that becomes my tactical plan, right? The first step I need to do is get a real estate agent. The next task is to identify some potential properties, select the space, sign the lease, and move in. But that has, what resources are required for each of those tasks. What's my timeline? When do I want to have that completed? And who's responsible, right? Who might, not necessarily everyone on that team, but who am I holding accountable for that specific task? So that's, again, this is just make believe, and it's not as detailed as it would need to be, but that gives you an example. So I would actually have this tactical plan would keep going, right? So I would go goal 1 to B, retaining my team of scientists, to C, and then I'd go to goal 2 and I'd work down so that it would basically just create itself my project plan, my tactical plans for my organization. Okay. You know what? Let's do this. All right. Let me pause right here. Pretend you're on you're back here. How often would you do each of these pieces? So your goals really should be, right? So your mission and your vision are sort of set, right? I mean, unless you've made a huge mistake and you need to go sort of restart your organization, your vision and your mission are pretty well set. When you write them, you might wordsmith them, but that is what you're doing, right? Until you stop doing it, that's what you're doing. Your goals, so the sort of meat of your strategic plan, your goals, I would say, I write 5-year goals and I revisit maybe every other year. Unless something major changes in my environment, it's hard to sort of just put 1-year goals in place, because then you're just always sort of spinning, right? So that might be true. I would probably reevaluate my strategic priorities, right? Am I doing the right things to achieve my goals? I'd probably do that exercise annually with my team. That doesn't mean I would change them annually. It does mean I would review them. And your tactics, that one might be annually or even shorter, depending on whether it's working or not, right? So you should have good measurement and feedback loops in place, so that you can actually, sort of shift gear if you need to in your tactical plan. Okay. So how do we know it's working? I'm a huge fan of what I call a dashboard. I create a 1-page dashboard for my board. The one I use for my teams is a little more detailed because they're living it every day. They probably need a little more information. They've got time for a little more information. But I sort of force myself to create a 1-page. I like to work in sort of horizontal pages. 1 page that encapsulates a snapshot of my business, so that if any point in time, I used to update them monthly for our board meetings. If your board meets every other month, even better. But it would just this 1-page snapshot, so that someone could look at it and basically have an idea of how we were doing. Right. So it would absolutely have my goals on it, timelines, some sort of summary of outcomes. Right. So if I had the goal of finding space, it would say, find space by second quarter. I'd be able to either have a checkbox or a little note that says delayed by a month because of X, Y, or Z. Right. So my goals would be right there on that page, with a summary of outcomes and output. And I'm going to assume if you're in the nonprofit world, you know the difference. So outcomes is my impact statement, right? So did I in fact improve the lives of children with disabilities? What is my metric for that? And then a summary of my output. How many people did I serve? How many hours? How many volunteer hours? Whatever that might be. It's sort of your tangible measure of throughput or output from your program, which is not the same thing as your outcomes. So be careful of that. Just because I put 500 kids kids with disabilities on horses this week does not mean I actually achieved my mission, right? Because my mission is to improve their lives. So those are 2 very different things, but both very important, right? Because the output talks about how many people I'm serving. It talks about the efficient use of my resources, right? So anyway, so your dashboard would want to have your goals, some sort of a summary of outcomes, achievements in that period of time, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever it might be, and then a summary of your output. How many were served, how many volunteer hours in that period. And then it'll have a financial snapshot. And if fee income is your thing, make sure that detail is in there. How much fee income did you bring in? If your organization charges anything, it may not charge fully, but anything for your services. How much fundraising came in that time period? What were my expenses? Were they on or off budget? But just a quick little square on that page somewhere that gives them a financial snapshot of where you are. And then what are the upcoming milestones? What to expect? What should your board look for coming next? And I literally would give it to them and I'd laminate it. And so if they're out in the community, they had their cheat sheet right with them, which is, wow, this is what Morning Dove is doing today or this month or last month. This is what's coming next, and we're doing great. And it's just a nice tool. And if you've never seen a dashboard, you feel free at the end. You'll have my email. You can shoot me an email and I'll share one with you. The other important part, how do we know what we're doing, is to set up a periodic assessment, right? Where it's some milestone. And it could be multiple time periods, right? It could be that monthly, I can't really evaluate whether I've improved the life of a child on a monthly basis, but I can certainly count how many I've served, how many hours of service I've given, how many hours of horse time has been used, whatever it might be. So is there something I can measure at a monthly basis that I know contributes to my success longer term? So you want to set up those milestones and those metrics. So, I like a monthly, a quarterly, and annually set of metrics so that I know I'm on track and make them measurable. You will find that if you do these two things, writing grants is almost a piece of cake because this is the kind of information your grantors will want in addition, to obviously whatever your program proposal is. And this also keeps you sort of remembering that even though I planned it well, it might not have come out the way I want. So for those of you who aren't in herding dogs, which I happen to be, the real goal, if you've never done this, it's actually quite a lot of fun if you have a herding dog. But the real goal is that those dogs are supposed to put the sheep inside that pen, and the shepherd and the two dogs are supposed to be outside. So, well, this clearly didn't go as planned. But having periodic metrics and assessment lets you catch this before it happens, right? So, silly sort of example, but if I were really out there with my dogs and we were really gathering sheep long before I ended up in the pen and the sheep on the outside, had I paused, so sort of say, is this going the way I expected, or the sheep controlling me, I might have avoided, this sort of bad outcome. Again, just sort of a silly example. But hopefully you get the point. Okay. All right. So, let's go back to Monkey Smart here, and then we just sort of take the same table. You don't have to do it in pink, but take this same table and just keep adding on to it, right? Which is, and I don't live my life this organized, but let me tell you how easy it is for a team who is all going in their own directions because we're all spread so thin and probably wearing multiple hats at the same time. If you can capture your strategic plan and your tactical plan at this level, it will really help everybody involved. So you can see the goal is right here, the strategic priority there on the left, the tasks that I need to achieve in order to be successful with that priority. I know what the timeline is, I know who's responsible, and I know how I'm going to measure my success, right? I've added in my key metrics so I can go right there and look at it. Okay, so just a tool, but all pieces of that tool are super important. All right, and here's the PS. Take the time to think about risk management. What could go wrong, right? Is there a regulatory change that could affect you, right? Am all of a sudden, am I not allowed to use, metal shovels to dig up flowers? Whatever it might be, understand the risk and how you're going to mitigate against that, right? So if all of a sudden something that I'm using as an input is no longer available for regulatory reasons, could I use wooden shovels, right? Bad example, but you can sort of get the point. What else could go wrong? Data breach. In fact, I just was on this committee this morning. We were talking about, what's our data breach response plan at a university, data breach being what if student data somehow were breached? Do we have that plan? Now, we put all the protocols in place, all the training that we need, all of the stop gaps in our IT systems to keep that from happening. But as you well know, if you read the paper, data breaches happen. And you need to anticipate that and think about it, right? So if data and private data is something that's part of your organization, you need to get that done right up front, okay? Is there a weather risk to what I do? If you can imagine equine therapy, we had tornado sirens and weather radio was on all the time. We had weather plans, whether that be alternative approaches to programming or it be sort of safety responses if weather were to come in suddenly, protocols, and compliance breach, right? So if you're in the sciences or whatever, if somebody gets off track with one of your protocols, and therefore it's created a problem. So you just need to think through these, just sort of play the scenario through, write the response plan. I call it a policies and procedures manual. You call it what you want, but it's worth going through and it's worth having your board go through, right? Go through and anticipate what could go wrong. And then think about what you do to mitigate that risk, right? Because that's really, you're not going to be able to avoid some of these things. I mean, that's unfortunately the nature of risk. Sometimes it's going to catch you, but there are things you can do to mitigate. So go through and think about that, right? What insurances do I need in place if I write my policies and procedures manual, and if I have one, and two, if I write in enough detail, can I avoid somebody making a mistake? Is my training good? Am I training well? Am I training the right people? How often am I training to make sure? Is there something in my physical environment, right? My facility or something that I could change to reduce the risk that the hurricane's going to take the roof off, right? You get the idea. So do take the time to do the risk management plan. Your board should probably have a risk management committee. If it doesn't, and this is the kind of thing that they should be driving, but your staff's going to have to be pretty involved, or you, if you happen to be your staff. But don't skip this part because unfortunately, risk does not wait for us to be ready for it. So, all right, just a few other things as we sort of wrap up here. Who's your strategic planning team, right? You do not want to do this in a vacuum. One, it's kind of boring to do it that way. But two, you will be more effective if you have different voices involved here. So just some ideas. Obviously, your executive director, you, whatever you call yourself, whoever's in charge, should absolutely be part of the planning process. Your board members or a subset, depends on how big your board is, depends on what the expertise of your board is and what else they might be doing. But actually, it's a good skill to add to your board if you don't have it, is somebody who's got strategic planning experience. But whether they do or not, you want your board members involved in your strategic plan so they own it and understand it, okay? And if you have no one who's ever done it before, think about bringing someone in. There are some really good consultants in our community here who specialize in nonprofits and specialize in business planning and strategic planning, and might be able to help your board at different levels. Okay. Resources that might help you get where you want to be. I find it really helpful to have somebody outside my organization review my strategic plan, just to give me the reality check on it. Does it make sense? Is there a glaring question that I haven't addressed? So think about who that might be. Might be just someone in the business world who's got some experience at it, who could just give it a read for you and give you some feedback. Local community foundation. I mean, there are some different places that you could go, but we have some great community foundations. I was in Boone County forever. I'm now working a little bit with Hamilton County, and I do a lot with Central Indiana. So, but they're good places just to touch base with and see if they can recommend a consultant. They often know exactly who those people are and might be able to connect you to someone either in your local community or someone who's familiar with your mission and the kind of work that you're planning to do. The other thing that your community foundations and other grantors, and there are others out there who like to do, is capacity building grants. So you might be able to, in fact, write a grant and get some funding to support your process, because capacity building, anything that you're doing, if you're putting a strategic plan in place or you're proposing to sort of add staff or whatever, that's building, right? That's adding capacity to your ability to serve your community, and there are grants out there for that. So if and in fact, I've received several of them in different organizations I've been part of. If you feel like you need a consultant, you might be able to, in fact, get a grant to cover that cost. So those are just some thoughts about other things that might help. So here we go. Summary. We're wrapping this up now. First up is your business plan. That's how you start your business. If that's where you are and you are on your timeline is at the start, write your business plan first. If you're already up and running, it's time to do a strategic plan. If you're just starting, pretty quickly after you get, sort of get the train built and put on the tracks, you want to write your strategic plan. You want to start with the big picture. Start with the vision and the mission, right? Make sure you understand what your goals are and what your goals aren't, right? Sort of where your boundaries are. Spend time here and get it right, get specific, really test it, get buy-in from your board. If you've ever done a vision and mission writing exercise with your board, it might feel counterproductive, but you actually will get to a good place eventually. But at some point, your board does need to be involved. Do your SWOT analysis, know what your starting point is, be really self-critical and understand where your organization is, what your needs are. Set your goals, define your plan, detail your tactics, okay? Understand and mitigate your risk, measure and assess your progress and your success, right? So make sure you have those measurements in place and you know how you're doing so that you can go back, rinse, right? And repeat, right? So you measure, we know how we're doing. We're going to go right back up periodically and redo that SWOT analysis. Notice my arrow does not go back to vision and mission. We're not redoing that. And then go back through. So periodically you want to relook just at that piece of your strategic plan. And here we are at the end of this really thrilling and exciting time that we spent together. I will order the chicken salad. It will be the greatest chicken salad man has ever tasted, and I will not be denied. After goal setting workshop, Larry's life was never quite the same. Here's my contact information. You are welcome to email me with questions. I can certainly answer a quick question. I can review a plan as long as not everyone who ever watches this sends me their plan, but I don't have time to write your plan for you. But I have done over the last 18 months times that I have done this workshop. I have had probably a handful of people take advantage of that, and I'm happy to do it if I can, to answer a question, direct you to resources, even read your vision and mission statements and give you some ideas. I certainly can do that. Okay. Last statement, and I believe this truly in my heart and every part of my life, but especially in the nonprofit world: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thanks, everyone, for your time. I wish you all the best because you're doing great work. And it's been my pleasure to share this with you. Thank you.